Welcome back everybody to Gemology for Schmucks. My name is Peter Nelson and I'm here to tell you everything you need to know about gemstones. Last week we talked with our friends at the lab and I just wanted to follow that up with a few other things that I think are important. The thing that we get from a lab is oftentimes by many people called a certificate, but there's a very important point to be made here. If you look at any of these certificates, of which I have 3 different labs, and there are far more labs than this, you will find that inside of each one of these, it does not say the word certificate, and that's for a very important point. Look at this one. Let's see right here. Emerald Report. Gemstone Report. Gemstone Report. And all of them are very particular about calling it a report. The GIA report actually even goes so far in its little disclaimer down here, these, 4 lines of fine print? And there's more on the back. But they actually capitalize the word report, which, considering it's not exactly a proper noun, doesn't really make sense on a grammatical level, but they're clearly trying to give it a sense of agency and that this word is important. So it's called a gemstone report, not a certificate, because of legal ramifications. Every gemstone report is a gemologist's opinion, which is something that gives them legal safety. So if you want to pursue them and say, well, you said this about my stone, that gives them the out to say, according to the evidence that I saw in the stone, then all I can say is what I saw and what we have measured. So in the future, as new treatments are coming out and as new ways of testing stones to find those treatments come out, there's going to be different evidence. A document is stuck in time, so nobody can certify a stone and say for sure 100% it is exactly like this. They can only say that based on the evidence, I have strong reason to believe that the stone is like this. It is a natural or synthetic or treated such and such and such. Particularly things like geographic origin. If they're saying, we believe, it is our opinion that the stone comes from this source, it can be nothing more than an opinion. Their opinion is backed up by evidence, but there is no way for them 100% to know that this stone comes from this place. For example, rubies that come from Afghanistan and rubies that come from Burma or Vietnam can look very similar and even have very similar compositions on a trace element level. It's far too much for most people to even get their minds around, let alone test and prove. And that's why a gemstone report is nothing more than a report. It's an opinion. So why is it so important to have a report if it's just an opinion and I can't sue them to death? And the truth of that is because a gemstone report gives you confidence to buy based on somebody else's opinion. There's no way for anybody to prove, so we just go for the next strongest handhold that we can grab onto on this mountain of confusion. You will still hear many people in the trade, to include myself from time to time, say the word certificate, but they're not going to write it down. So try and get yourself into the habit of saying report as often as possible, because that's all you're going to find on one of these gemstone reports. The next thing that I'd like to do is talk about some of the key features that are on all of these reports, what's consistent among them, and some of the information that might change. So as we look at this report, what you're going to see at the top is a number for this report. And that's useful because if you go to most of these labs' websites, you can typically look up this report on their website. Not all labs do this, not all labs have been doing this for the entirety of their history, but it's becoming much more common. Most of the major labs, and including some of the smaller labs, will have a database that you can just check online as long as you have this number. And that's particularly helpful if you're dealing with people that live in another country. You can give them this report number, they can go on the website, and they can check out the report for themselves. And even if you do have the report in hand, it's very important to cross-reference your report with the one that is in the database. There are some fraudulent people out there that have actually been creating their own websites and their own reports using the names of major labs. Their reports are excellent as far as a fake goes. The colors are the same, the fonts are the same, everything about it looks the same, except it's not issued by the gemologists of that lab. So it's very important when you get a certificate, if you're considering to buy, that you double check the certificate with their website and that you check the URL of that lab's website. For example, one of the major labs, which I won't disclose the name of, had somebody defraud them by creating another website that is the same lab's name, .com, but instead of .com, they put .co. And so unless you're looking closely, you won't see that this is actually a fake website. You may not even know that it's a fake website. Well, it's a real website, fake lab. And they even had their own report lookup area. They had a database, so you could look up and find the fake certificate. And so that's one of the games that is played. I haven't seen many of these, but I have heard of them. So it's very important to double check if you don't know the person that you're doing business with. So do your due diligence. Back to the report. After the report number, we've got some identification information. So typically that's the mineralogical name of the stone. So this right here is a peridot, so it'll say natural peridot, and then it's got olivine in brackets, which is one of the mineralogical names for this stone. They'll typically have a picture, which is oftentimes not that beautiful. Sometimes it's more beautiful than the actual stone, you never know. And then below that, they'll have things like the dimensions of the stone, the length, the width, and the depth, which can be very important if you're planning to do something like make jewelry. And I may or may not be making an episode about that soon. Let's fast forward to the last two things that are important about this report. Down here in the comments, or it might be called treatments or enhancements, you will see some other information that the gemologist thinks might be important for you. So for example, with this olivine, it says no indication of thermal treatment. And that basically is what we call heating in the trade. Now, to my understanding, heating in peridot is less common. It's much more of an issue in something like corundum. But hey, it's something to say on the report, right? And the next thing over here is origin. Not all gemstone reports include origin. It's typically the higher price bracket that includes origin. And as I hope is immensely clear to all of you, origin is incredibly difficult to tell. In certain stones, it's next to impossible to tell. But people still like to throw it around because in their opinion, it's a value-added item. Oh, so peridot from Pakistan as opposed to peridot from China, there's supposed to be a price difference. In my opinion, if the color is the same, and the clarity is the same, and the carat weight is the same, then what's the issue? Of course, every enterprise has its own costs, I understand that, so in whatever way you want to make and add value, then you do you. Let me draw your attention to another one over here. We've got an emerald report from GIA, and this one has all of the same things. It has a report number, which they have in a different location, right here next to the picture. They also have the gem identification, which they put in a different terminology. They call it conclusion, so species natural beryl. That's the mineralogical name of emerald. Variety, cat's eye emerald. This is very rare, by the way, but we've got one. And then geographic origin. Here they're shaming us by saying we didn't request it. To us, the specimen was more valuable because of the cat's eye effect, which is very rare in emeralds, as opposed to the origin. Who cares if it's from Colombia or Zambia or Afghanistan? In this situation, the cat's eye is what makes it cool. And then down here where it says treatment, it says indication of clarity enhancement. In emeralds, it's very common to add oil or resin to fill the fissures. More often than not, emeralds have some kind of fissures, sometimes a lot of fissures. And if you put oil into those fissures, it reduces how white they are, and it makes them seem more clear. So sometimes it's called clarity enhancement. These terms are the kind of thing that you need to learn about if you're going to be dealing actively with things like emeralds or rubies. You need to learn about those particular treatments or enhancements and learn what kind of terminology the labs use as opposed to what the trade uses. Because they can be very different. Oiling as opposed to clarity enhancement? If you didn't know, how would you know? Ask somebody. So right here it says indication of clarity enhancement, F1. What is F1? Well, fortunately for us, GIA includes a little ranking system of what F1 means. And so that F1, if we follow it over here, says indications of minor clarity enhancement. And that means that there's a small amount of oil or resin or whatever substance inside of the fissures. And that's typically detected using the microscope. This is also based on an opinion. Different labs and different gemologists have a little bit of a different standard. I have yet to hear a mathematical, objective way of qualifying what's the difference between minor, moderate, heavy oiling, or insignificant or no oiling. So it's important not only to rely on a report, but to really dig into what the report is saying and what could it mean. And if you think, oh, an enhancement, this is something you did to the stone to make it better. But in this case, maybe not. A stone like emerald can actually get oil into the fissures just by touching it. The oils from your hands can seep into the stone. And if a strict gemologist looks at it and they go, I see a substance in that fissure, they're going to give it minor oiling. So try to broaden your mind. So I hope that that has helped you to decode some of these gemstone reports, which we will not call certificates anymore, right? Pinky swear. So if you've got any questions about reports, please leave them in the comments area below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and tell all of your friends about it. And until next week, I will say bye-bye.